Hello, kindergartners. Today I am going to read the story of Tom Thumb. All right, here we go. The story of Tom Thumb, a folktale from England adopted by James Baldwin. More than 1,000 years ago in England, in the days of the great King Arthur, there lived a man named Merlin. Merlin knew so many wonderful things and was so very wise that people called him a wizard. Once upon a time, he was traveling across the country dressed as a poor beggar. In the evening, he stopped at a farmhouse and asked if he might stay there all night, for he had walked far and he was tired, and there were no inns nearby. The farmer gave him a hearty welcome and led him into the house, while the farmer's wife brought him some milk in a wooden bowl and some brown bread on a platter. Merlin was much pleased with the kindness, and he spent the night with them very happily. Everything about the house was neat and cozy, but still Merlin noticed that the farmer and his wife often looked very sad and heaved deep sighs. In the morning, Merlin said to them, "My friends, you seem to live a pleasant life in this cottage. Why then do you seem so unhappy?" "Ah me," said the poor woman with tears in her eyes, "we are sad because we have no children. I would be the happiest woman in the world if I had a son. Why, even if the boy were no bigger than my husband's thumb, I would be satisfied." Merlin laughed at the thought of a boy no bigger than a man's thumb, and after he had eaten a breakfast of bread and milk, he thanked the good farmer and his wife and went on his way. As he thought again of a boy no bigger than a man's thumb, his eyes twinkled merrily and a smile brightened his face. Within a year, the farmer's wife had a son, and he was not a bit bigger than his father's thumb. One day, as the happy mother was looking at the tiny babe and thinking how pretty he was, who should come flying through the window but the Queen of Fairies with 7 other fairies behind her. The fairy queen kissed the tiny baby and announced, "He shall be called Tom Thumb." Then she turned to the 7 other fairies and sang, "Of an acorn cup we'll make his crown, his coat we'll weave of thistles down, his shirt of spider's web we'll spin, for trousers feathers warm yet thin, his shoes we'll make of mouse's skin, tanned with the downy hair within." As Tom got older, he never grew any larger than his father's thumb. Still, he was a clever and brave lad. There were times, however, when his small size led to some surprising adventures. One day, when his mother was making a cake, Tom climbed up on the edge of the bowl to see how it was done. When his mother began to stir, she gave the bowl such a shake that Tom slipped and fell head over heels into the batter. His mother did not see him fall in, and so she kept on stirring and stirring, while poor little Tom was covered with milk and eggs. His mouth was so full of the batter that he could not cry out. Then, to make matters worse, Tom's mother poured the batter into a pan and popped the pan into the oven to bake. When the batter began to get hot, Tom kicked and pounded with all his might. When Tom's mother saw the pan shaking and rattling in the oven, she cried out in fright and threw the pan out the window. Just at that time, a poor wanderer came walking by. "Well, now," he said, "a cake that's thrown out a window is a cake that's not wanted. And if they don't want it, why then I'll just help them by taking it." So he lifted the cake from the pan and put it in the basket on his back. He had not walked far when Tom finally got the batter out of his mouth and began to cry out at the top of his lungs. When the poor man heard the screams, he was so frightened that he dropped his basket and ran down the road as fast as he could go. What a sorry looking fellow Tom was when he crept out of that cake. He climbed out of the basket and made his way home. When his mother saw him, she cried, "Tommy, Tommy, you're a sticky mess. Tell me, my boy, what has happened?" So he told his mother all about it. Of course, she was sorry, but she was glad that at least he had not drowned in the batter. She put him into a teacup and gave him a warm bath and then laid him in bed. Not long after this, Tom's mother went to milk her cow in the meadow, and she took him along with her. It was a very windy day, and to keep the little fellow from being blown away, she tied him to a thistle with a piece of thread. When the cow saw little Tom's acorn cup hat, she thought that it would be a tasty treat. So she picked Tom and the thistle up in a mouthful. Tom was very much afraid of her big teeth, and when she began to chew, he cried as loud as he could, "Mother, mother!" "Where are you, my dear Tommy?" said his mother. "Here, mother," he said. "Here I am in the cow's mouth." His mother cried, "Oh, my poor little boy, you shall be swallowed for sure." But Tom had begun to kick with all his might until the poor cow thought she had swallowed a mad wasp. She opened her mouth and gave a loud moo, and just then, lickety split, out jumped Tom. His mother caught him in her apron and carried him home. "Oh, Tom," she said, "I must take better care of you. I can't let you out of my sight for even a minute." The very next day, Tom went with his father to help drive the cows from the field. As he ran along, his foot slipped and he rolled into a ditch. Just at this moment, a great black raven swooped down and snatched Tom up in its claws. But when the bird realized that Tom was not a frog or a cricket or something good to eat, it dropped poor Tom down, down, down into the deep, dark sea. Ah, what would have become of poor Tom if it had not been for his friends, the fairies? He had hardly touched the water when a big fish swallowed him and swam away. But the fish was quickly caught by a fisherman who sold it to the servants of King Arthur. When they cut the fish open in order to cook it, they were surprised to find the teeny lad. And Tom, who had quite enough of the floating in a fish's belly, was glad to see the sun again, you can be sure. The servants carried Tom to the king, who laughed to see the little fellow. From that day forth, whenever the king rode out on horseback, he took Tom along with him. And if the rain came on or if the wind blew chill, Tom would creep through a buttonhole and snuggle close to the great king's heart. One day, the king asked Tom about his father and mother and wanted to know whether they were as small as he was. "Your Majesty," said Tom, "my mother and father were as tall as other people. They are good people and kind, but they are not rich. They have very little, but they do not complain of that." "Oh, your Majesty," Tom cried, "I am sure they miss me and must be greatly worried what has become of me. I beg of you that I might go and see them." The king said that indeed he could go and that he should take with him as much money as he could carry. But as Tom was so small, he could hardly lift even a single penny onto his back. So the king ordered a craftsman to build a tiny cart, and into the cart he placed a small pile of gold coins. Two mice were harnessed to pull the tiny cart, and Tom was to walk proudly by their side. The suit of clothes that the fairies had made for Tom was now pretty well worn out, so the king gave orders that he should have another. Of butterflies' wings his shirt was made, his boots of chicken skin, and by fairies learned in the tailor's trade, his coat and trousers were both made, and lined without and within. For a sword, a needle hung by his side, a dapper mouse he used to ride. Thus strutted Tom in stately pride. Tom's parents were very glad to see him. They wept and laughed at once and gently hugged him and called him all sorts of fond names. They made a bed for him in the sugar bowl and feasted him on a hazelnut. When the time came for Tom to go back to King Arthur, it had rained so much that he could not travel. So his mother made a little parcel of thin paper and tied him to it. Then she opened the window and gave a puff with her mouth, and the wind carried him safe over the hill and dale to the king's palace. The king was very much pleased with the tiny knight and ordered a little chair to be made so that Tom could sit upon his table, and he built for him a palace of gold with a door an inch wide, and fitted it for him to live in. He also gave him a coach drawn by 6 small mice, and so Tom Thumb lived out his days as the smallest knight in the court of the great King Arthur. And that is the end of our story. All right, kindergartners, I hope you enjoyed our story. And let's end with a quick Yeti high five. Ready? Yeti high five. Yeti high five. All right, Yetis, I'll see you later. Bye-bye. Have a good day.